everybody. Today we have our first interview on Integrate Yourself. This is episode 11, and we're going to interview Brian McKay, who is he's someone that we met at one of our workshops, our Journeys of Wisdom workshops. We're going to talk a little bit more about emotional stuff today. But I first wanted to introduce Brian because he's actually got he's got a really cool background in holistic nutrition, fitness, and wellness, similar to Maya and I, and that's part of the reason we met him. But his website is painfreefitness.com, and he also has a podcast called Optimum Human, and you can find that at let's see. He has an email address, Brian at painfreefitness.net, and the email for the Optimum Human is Brian at theoptimumhuman.com. And his website for the podcast is theoptimumhuman.com, and it's a pretty good podcast. I've listened to it. It's pretty cool. Lots of great guests on there, and I've enjoyed all the ones I've listened to, Brian. So, yeah. But thank you for coming on our show today.
Cool. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no problem. I just want to say that you call yourself a holistic exercise and nutrition coach. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay,
that's
cool.
That's what I call myself anyway.
Yeah, right. We have all these different names for ourselves for sure, and titles. So let's get started. I wanted just to ask Brian, like, how he got into this, like what inspired you to start helping people this way.
Well, I mean, originally my background comes from my own, basically screwing up my life. I got involved with substances pretty heavily earlier on in life, and ended up finding, quote, spiritual life through the 12-step programs. And I did that for basically a decade, and for the last few years, things just weren't jiving with me. And so I ended up basically stumbling across Paul Chek's work. During that time, I actually took my first Chek course, and just working with my own issues, my own physical pain. I went through a breakup and decided that I was going to never go through that pain again and get into great shape and fix myself that way. And yeah, that didn't work out real well for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been quite a journey, and sharing a bit of my journey and certainly what I've learned along the way with others, and it's really interesting to me to see how many people are living similar ways to ways that I lived, and not serving myself, physically, mentally, emotionally, and the word that I dread using so much because it can have so many negative connotations, that spiritual aspect as well.
Right. It's kind of trendy right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, cool. Thanks for sharing that. I guess we will ask the question first to start off, kind of like an icebreaker type of thing, is how do you like to integrate yourself?
Wow.
Just maybe throw a few like little.
Yeah, I mean that's quite an icebreaker.
Yeah, I know, right? Like one or two things are fine. You don't have to tell us. Give us an expanded like.
Yeah, I
thing
think
or
just certainly working on a meditation practice for myself. Do I do it daily? Not by chance, but
Yeah.
working on doing it more, and just starting to or continuing to listen to my intuition and give myself more of what I need, whether it's, time off or, go move or go for a walk or go be in nature or whatever else it may be. Yeah, I think that kind of
cool.
answers.
I love that. Thanks. Yeah, that was awesome. All right.
Thanks for the question.
Go ahead.
It's a really good question. Icebreakers. Normally, I think of like, hey, how much does a polar bear weigh?
Right.
Ice.
Well, it's either to get you to open up to tell us what you think about how your life has been transcending from all the stuff that you've learned so far. So one of the things we've learned in the way we've kind of picked up so many things from so many people is what part of us needed to take in and integrate it into ourselves, because we don't implement it as much as we may have just collected the information and said, oh yeah, that really resonates with me, but then it sits on the shelf. So we're asking ourselves, where do we need to integrate more? Like, what is it that we haven't been utilizing this great knowledge or great experience that we've had? So an icebreaker, yes, maybe not so, we can, we kind of, don't know where if we're bringing in the ice or taking away the ice, but it's just mainly the way of knowing what makes you really find that gratitude in what you're doing. Like, where is it that it's finding you and you are finding it?
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I've actually started since the intensive where we met at, started doing daily gratitudes and posting that on social media, and it's been a noticeable change. It started off pretty early. It started off pretty easy. The first week, 10 days, maybe 14 days, and as it gets in, I'm going, well, man, I'm having a harder time finding things to be grateful for it. And so it's challenging, but in a good way, and really training myself to, have gratitude be more of a way of being, as opposed to really struggling for it. Because it's something, practice gratitude. I'm like, there's been times in my life where, I've got all these things to be grateful for, and I'm just not grateful for anything. Screw the world and this and that. And so, I think that practice has definitely served me quite well. And there's also the ego benefit of posting it on social media and having other people like my gratitude. So,
because you're
which is integrating, right? Absolutely.
Because they can see how creative you are, right? Like, you got this real insight, and people can go, oh, I never thought of that one. That's a real good one. There's always these great ideas that we come up with and think, oh, this is the best one. Like, one of the things we thought of was 100 kisses for our dog. And, and I looked up, and somebody's already done 100 kisses, but for girls, but not for dogs. So, I thought, well, people want to do this for their animals, how can you be with your animal and say thank you for your unconditional love, and so I think that social media definitely tests our ego into knowing its humbleness, because you get so many people putting stuff out there.
Does that ever seem like an oxymoron to me? I'm curious if there's any truth in that.
Yeah.
I've noticed that a lot, because I come up with these great ideas, right? I'm like, oh, they'll love it, and then nobody likes it. And I'm like, oh, well, I guess I was took away.
That
and then it's the idea of some people we know they do a one, and they think that no one's gonna like it, and everyone loves it, and then they change their world, right? So So one of the questions I have is, how did you find holistic coaching with Journeys?
So, long story. I originally saw John McMullen's name several years ago through a guy named Josh Rubin's social media, and I ended up buying one of his books on Kindle, and recently I went in there and saw that I made it to the first page. I'm going to suggest I wasn't quite ready at that point in time, but
I understand.
So we ended up having JP Sears on our podcast. We ended up having his good buddy Jator, and one of the questions that we ask all of our guests is, who would you like to hear on this podcast? And Jator's answer was John McMullen. And so we ended up having John on. And at least for me, that was probably the most memorable podcast that we've done. And so he actually invited us both down to one of his intensives. And I think about a week later, all right, let's do it. So I bought a last minute plane ticket and flew down there and got to meet you guys and everyone else down there. So
yeah, that was so much fun. I really enjoyed that. And we talked a little bit about like I know I've talked to you since then a little over the phone, and we've mentioned the word rebounding, and I think that's a big word right now in the spiritual community, especially. But I don't know that everybody is familiar with that term.
Yeah, I was going to say I hadn't heard it outside of the Journeys of Wisdom. So.
Oh, really?
So
okay,
would you actually give your definition or what you heard their definition of rebounding is?
So I guess my definition would be when we maybe do something that feels uncomfortable, and then later on we want to take it back. Why did I do that? Or just kind of a feeling when we really get into some deep stuff, and just kind of that feeling afterward of, wow, this is just really uncomfortable, and then just kind of hopefully choose to sit with that feeling, and allow that to process, as opposed to, ooh, this is uncomfortable, I'm going to go medicate with, whatever we choose to medicate with, whether it be alcohol or fiction or fantasies or whatever else. So
yeah,
that's my on it.
Yeah. Yeah,
that's a good one.
Yeah, it's a good way to look at it for sure. And I think that's the challenge, is people have this sense of regret after going through some kind of emotional release like that, and or giving up a secret that you've held in for so long. That's the rebounding, in my opinion, like how you're like, oh, why did I say that, or why did I do that, and there's a lot of regret there. But then kind of like getting comfortable with it and realizing that was okay, and then everything's all right, and then you're integrating that now, those parts of yourself back into the mix. And so how has that been for you, Brian? Have you been able to do any integration, or have you gone through the rebounding phase there, or yourself?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. I was just thinking about I had a layover on the flight home, and it was incredibly uncomfortable, realizing that I was having to go back to real life, and I didn't have the safety of the group, and it was just very uncomfortable. And it was the first time I've really ever chose to, without anybody's outside suggestion, to journal and just kind of see how I could best work my way through this, these fears, and just that uncomfortable feeling, for lack of a more descriptive word.
Yeah, because it's about the processing time, right? Yeah. Go ahead, Maya.
Yeah, I mean, most of the time I like to have an analogy, and it's basically like when you drop your pants and you're like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have dropped my pants so far.
I like that.
Kind of like to add like a whole bunch of pants, right? Because like that didn't happen, right? I didn't do that. No, we didn't see that. And so mainly the emotions that come up for me are the ones that, how do I handle being the adult person that I want to be, with these inner children saying, hey, I just did something. I'm not really sure what I did, but I know I needed to do it. And I'm here to get guidance to make sure that we don't have to go back into the closet. We don't have to, worry about what we said. We're not going to have some kind of retribution of some sort, whether it's from another part of my inner self or whatever that comes from this discussion of my secret or my opening of my vulnerability. And that makes it easier in some ways to say, I'm progressing in a way where I can be my best friend and help myself through the process of knowing that when I get stuck, I don't always have to run for somebody. I can say, okay, we got this. We just take baby steps. We work around what we
Right.
can, and just sit with the overwhelming feelings and say, all right, let's just take them apart and kind of take them in, and breathe them in and breathe them out. Okay, so it's a little bit of a better process as time has gone on, but it sure does bring up that feeling of, boy, I really opened myself up for something big, and that's good and kind of scary at the same time.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I think this could apply to a lot of other circumstances too, like spiritual people going through spiritual things. There's a lot of those kinds of things being offered right now, those kind of ceremonies and through yoga as well. But also just being intimate with someone, can have that effect sometimes for people. You have these regrets about opening yourself up and being vulnerable. It could even be, being intimate with people that are, you're trying to put yourself out there a little bit more, and it could be that too. So, and that's what keeps us hiding, right? And not going out and doing those things, because we have that regretful rebounding effect sometimes, and we don't want to experience that. But getting past that, I think, is really powerful.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
would definitely agree with that.
Yeah.
So we might have something merely in common, is that we use our podcast to help bring ourselves out more in the public and help get information that we've learned. So with your podcast, what would you say is the next step for you, and how you and your partner are going to establish, your next couple of interviews, or what you're looking for next? Or
Ooh, that's another really good question. We're just at least for me, I tend to be the one to reach out to more of the people, and I think between the question of who would you like to hear on the podcast, and then just other people that we are interested in what they're doing and how they're living, and what they have to say, and just inviting a various range of people. We just not sure when it'll come out, but just interviewed a woman who her brother ended up committing suicide, and she decided to take on basically working with men to work through their issues. And it's a little bit out of our typical realm of the fitness, nutrition, and then kind of the mindset, but I mean, obviously still mindset. And so it was just a little bit different, but we love to be able to get pieces and pick the brains from people who have differing views and philosophies. And I think for the most part, what I'm trying to say in a whole lot of words is just, whoever comes up, is going to come up, and it's all going to be, God, I feel like a hipster saying this, divinely perfect.
Yeah, I like that though.
Cool.
I find with our own podcast, we tend to draw in whoever's in our life that we want to learn from, and that kind of shows up by how much of like what we need to learn too comes through, right? So there's the things like Allison's really going into the movement part. She's been there for a while, but she's really connecting to some fabulous women, with the MoveNet, and then also with like spirit weavers. And then I've kind of went into more of like some of the Kate Deering and the Z Health, and some people that have some different perspectives on the mainstream stuff that kind of came through when we were looking at health years ago. And so it's almost like turning itself on a dime, trying to change back to some old theories that really actually work. And I've noticed you said you were looking at the book, Kate Deering's book, How to Heal your metabolic. Can't even say it. Metabolism.
That one book.
Metabolism. Thank you. So, and you've come from a different background from your own. I don't know if you did paleo or what were your.
Actually, originally my nutrition philosophy, I was taught the quote, and I'm air quoting, the Ray Peat, Josh Rubin philosophy.
Oh, okay.
And from what I've come to understand, I was doing it wrong. So it's not that it didn't work, it's that I wasn't doing it correctly.
Well, I would love to hear more about that if you want to share, Brian.
Sure.
What did you feel like you were doing wrong on that?
Just way, way, way too many carbs.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And so I couldn't balance my blood sugar. It was always up and down. And I think one of the main things was not enough fat.
Okay.
I thought I was eating enough fat, but since beginning to track, actually, use tracking, it's going like, wow, it wasn't even close. So
your ratios were off, basically.
Yeah,
you were seeing like symptoms, or what kind of things were happening? Yeah.
So just I have a meal and end up with cold feet for one. That's like my biggest.
Oh, right.
Or if something's working, and then also at the same time get that really drowsy insulin response feeling.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's interesting kind of playing with things and figuring out, sometimes I get the insulin response, sometimes I get the cold feet, sometimes both, sometimes neither, and really playing with that. Those are the symptoms that I pay attention to find out if a meal is really working for me or not.
Cool. Yeah.
So it's a journey, to say the least.
It definitely
Absolutely.
is. I agree with that.
And we actually like to tell people to take it slow because my own experience, I actually had way too much fat. And so that kind of brought in a whole other aspect for me, especially for a female body and what it does. So it's different in all aspects, but everyone comes through a little too fast or a little too committed to, this is the, it's always like I found the chalice or something that makes it's going to solve all of it, right? And it's really more,
this is the ideal, and I'm going to just jump straight to the ideal.
Straight through it, right?
Without doing all the other stuff, or letting your body, or giving your body time to actually adjust to it. The metabolism to heal and all those things. So I think that's part of the disconnect, is that people don't really understand how the body works and how the metabolism gets back on track. We've been taught all these kind of myths about dieting and calories in, calorie out. You have all these, like, I guess, dogmas. It's just like kind of silly, but people still believe them. A lot of people still believe these things, actually.
Yeah, and it's interesting to be on the cutting edge. I mean, I am connected through social media to a lot of people over in Europe, and I've had a couple of people on our podcast that have said basically Europe's about 10 years behind the U.S. in things in both good and bad, and so I continue to see calories in, calories out is the only thing that matters from these practitioners over in Europe,
I didn't know that.
I'm just going like, scratching my head.
Yeah, I mean,
learn from our mistakes.
Calling people out is not going to win friends and influence people.
Yeah.
No, and surely
just worry about what I'm doing.
Taking the humbleness of the roads that we have traveled so that we know that, people have to go their own pace and we have to meet them where they're at. And, so like one of the blessings of holistic coaching is for me is that we definitely know that, you open yourself up to saying that person needs to be where they're at for a reason. And what we kind of really find, well, like I said, I find is that when I start to talk to people, it's really small and very like increments of like this much versus like that much, where we kind of say to them, don't tell them the whole story, just give them this much, because they don't really know what that would do to change their whole world. And so we want to just kind of help people, be the authority of their own being. And we kind of hope that people will take what we're offering and see if it fits for them. And we kind of know that you kind of have that same kind of thought process when you help with people. So have you noticed some changes in how you work with your clients now that you kind of have some of this different knowledge?
To a degree, yes, and to a degree, no. So to a degree, yes. Just looking at and really asking more questions, for one. I mean, whether it be kind of on the mental emotional end of things or, on the nutritional end of things. And, so what you eat, how did you feel afterward? Okay. Do you think that worked for you or not? Okay. How was your workout? Okay. Do you feel more energized or less energized? Okay. How do you think that that's going to serve you? And so just getting people to, I would say, teaching people how to ask themselves better questions.
I love that.
Start questioning what we know to be true.
Mm-hmm. That's
I know. Yeah. When I was down there, I was actually on a brief hiatus, kind of moving away from again, I just call it the how to heal your metabolism style of diet. And I moved shortly for, a couple of weeks into more metabolic typing. And it worked well for me for a week and a half. And then I noticed it didn't work for me. And so it's questioning what I know to be true. And I will say this, it's frustrating for me is not having my shit together. Like totally. Like I don't have a fully functioning metabolism, and like I'm trying to teach other people, and all I can do is really share my experience and what I've learned through how the body works, as opposed to what the latest fad trend is. I was watching the news this morning, and there was something on keto.
Oh, that's a new thing.
Yeah, it's the big thing, and part of me questions if there's something to it, and part of me face palms. So
yeah, no, I totally agree with you. I know it keeps coming up in my world too, and but it's just I just wonder, for what purpose is it for? I mean, I kind of feel like that kind of thing is for someone who's actually in a certain a state of health, and it's for a temporary thing. It's temporarily to be used.
I think that was what it was originally created for. I don't think it was meant to be lived indefinitely.
No, I don't think so. But of course, we'll probably do that. We're doing that.
We'll see what happens 70 years from now.
Yeah. Maybe even sooner.
Yeah.
But I'm not to say that I don't like. I'm really not judging people who try it, because I think that's great to want to try something new and discover if it works for you or not. I think that's awesome. But I know that, like, when I help my clients, though, I know enough about those things that I know that how those are going to go and how they're going to work. And so, of course, I choose to teach them like you do, Brian, about their bodies and how that works. And then they can choose to then do, what they need to do to keep those bodies running well. And I think that's kind of the key, and not any specific diet, because I think we've been going at it wrong, like more about the food being like, I mean, of course, the quality of food is very important, but yeah, what kind, like, let's talk about how our body works first, then support our body with those foods, right? Instead of vice versa.
Right. But
Yeah.
then again, ain't nobody got time for that.
I know, of course. Yeah, that's the thing. Like it's kind of like similar to rebounding, like you're not giving yourself that time to process stuff, and then you're just going to go back to where you were, and hide again or do whatever you were doing. And so like if we can think of it like that, like I always tell people with nutrition, it's just like working out, or it takes time. It takes time to develop, the muscle for that. So if we could think of it similar to that, I think, but for some reason, the nutrition industry has made people think that you're going to get results in like a month, and then you're going to be awesome. Everything's going to be awesome. And,
and unfortunately, that's what sells.
It does. Yeah, that's true.
It's really hard to sell a nutrition program that's going to say you're going to gain weight for the first 2 months, but then after that you're going to be way better. Like people don't buy that.
No, that wouldn't go over very well. That's very true. Good point.
We have come to know that those people that are really needing help will come to that point of the intersection and say, you know what, I don't care if I gain a little something, because I've been down so many roads that have knocked me out that I can't afford to just keep, not doing what I needed to get done, So I feel like as I talk with you, Brian, that you really have come to a place of knowing that the struggles of as us being as practitioners, we're as human as the people we work with, and for me, coming to a place of knowing that every time I'm in front of someone, they're teaching me and I'm teaching them, and allowing that interplay to kind of keep going, because that's the beauty of it all, right? We kind of learn from each other, and we help each other give information to help support the next step. And so when we kind of work with more and more people, we kind of find that is I find that is the best way to work with people. I don't know if that's for you, but that seems to be what I go for now, is like, let me and you work together on this and kind of see where we go from there. Is that true for you?
Yeah, I don't want to hold anybody's hand. I'm not looking to be a guru.
Right.
Looking to share my knowledge, my experience, all the hours that I put in learning this stuff and sharing that the best that I can. And, let you do with that what you will. And I think you guys have kind of alluded to it. I like the phrase spoon feeding people information and new ideas.
Yeah.
Because I know for me, being human, cognitive dissonance is a very strong thing, and so you try to get me to change what I'm doing, 180 degrees, and I'm just going to kick back and no way. So it's just kind of understanding how the human experience is.
Yeah. And there's deep respect with that too, right? As you know, not to push, because, it doesn't do anything but cause the resistance to come back. So as you persist, you resist, it kind of does the same thing, right? Everything is a buoyancy backwards, right? It kind of brings you to that, you're going to hit an interface where it's going to either push back onto you or you're going to push into it. And then it's nowhere but just this resonance of back and forth. Okay, wait, I've done this, you've done that. How do we, and that kind of interaction becomes very draining.
It absolutely does.
Absolutely, yeah.
Is there any other questions that you have for us as our guests? We really appreciate your time. Let's ask your question. Who would you like to see on our podcast?
So first person that comes to mind is Kate Deering.
Oh,
All right.
that's what we talked about. Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
We're on target then.
Yay.
Yeah, I intend on reaching out to her myself as well. So
Yeah.
Awesome.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. Well, Brian, can you share with our audience how to the best way to get in touch with you and find your podcast and all that stuff?
Yeah, sure. So as far as finding me, connect with me on Facebook. Brian McKay. Currently, my profile picture is with me and JP Sears. May not stay that way for forever, but it's a great way to connect with me. It is.
Yeah.
And then as far as the podcast, theoptimumhuman.com. I've got all our episodes up, a lot of great stuff from amazing people, and looking forward to having you guys both on as well. I know you guys both have a lot of wisdom to share, so I'll definitely look forward to having you guys on.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I can't speak for Vi of it. Yeah.
You can speak.
You just did.
I know. I didn't mean to.
We slide on that every once in a while.
I know.
Well, thank you, Brian.
Yeah, thank you so much, Brian, for coming on and sharing with everybody. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you guys.
Yeah.
It's been an awesome experience coming on, and thank you for having me as your first guest.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You broke the ice for us, for sure.
Man, it's something about northern climates.
Yeah. Right.
Thankfully, it's the summertime, so
yeah. Well, enjoy.
no ice right now.
Yeah, right. And a cliche that I like is you are now integrated into our family.
Yes,
thank you.
I like that.
Wow, that actually to deflect, that hits me right in the feels. So thank you.
Oh, good.
Love it.
All right.
Until next time.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
All right, guys. Bye-bye.